Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Excited to bring you this webinar on headcount planning featuring two P&A leaders at IonQ. My name is Charlie Schreier. I'm the head of marketing at Team Ohana. So really glad to welcome all of you to our webinar. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started, and then I'll turn it over to our main host for today, which is Tushar, our CEO. But if you have any questions along the way, please drop them in the Q&A box. We're also going to open up the chat. So if you have comments, questions, you can also ask them in there. But we'll bring all of your questions together for the end, and we can pass them along to Jessica and Omar and Tushar, even if we do have questions that come up that way. I'll be leading us through a few slides, just kind of as 10 posts for the conversation. But at this point, I think it makes sense that I pass it over to Tushar to do some intros and jump right into the webinar. So Tushar, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie. And thank you everybody for joining, and especially a big thanks to Jessica and Omar for spending time with us and sharing all their tips and tricks around headcount planning. So why don't we get started, and welcome everybody. Welcome Jessica, welcome Omar. Why don't we start with a quick introduction? Jessica, we start with you. Ladies first.
Hello, my name is Jessica Hawken-Allen. I am an FP&A business partner here at IonQ. IonQ is a quantum computing company. We're actually the first pure play public quantum computing company that IPO'd via SPAC back in October 2021. So we are a small but mighty public company, and Omar and I are helping drive our strategic finance, FP&A, investor relations, lots of different hats that we wear over here at IonQ.
I think Jess did a good enough intro, but my name is Omar Hamadi. I'm on the same team as Jess, and we're really excited to do this with Tushar and the rest of the team.
Thank you. So all right, let's go and talk about what are we going to cover in the next 45 minutes. I think we want to start by just prefacing that why headcount planning is a critical process that needs to be run more efficiently at a company of any size, whether it's a 300 employee company, 500 employee company, or absolutely necessary if you're more than 1,000 employees. We do talk about the time and the cost that a company would incur throughout the year in order to not just create a headcount plan, which may be a once or twice a year activity, but managing the headcount plan on a regular basis. And I think here in our prep call, Jessica was able to share exactly that, how this small and mighty team is able to remain agile and deliver on all the whims of the R&D org while still staying in budget. So that's going to be something very interesting. And of course, I think as any good process should be inclusive and not be siloed between an FP&A team or an HR team or a engineering team, but it should bring all the people together. And then why does the real-time visibility matters? It's not just why does it matter, but what benefits does it bring to the company, especially the benefit around how quickly they can make and execute on decisions. And then finally, we'll make sure we open it up for Q&A. So that's where we wanted to get started. So I think this slide we chose, we wanted to explain, and especially Jessica and Omar bring you into this conversation, is that you're one of the companies that went through SPAC and the stock is still above $10. So congratulations. So you're doing a lot of things right. Right? Maybe the Chamath didn't run your SPAC. That's a good thing. But what has changed? We have gone from 0% interest rates to 5% now. But the requirements of the companies from a growth perspective, especially now that you're a public company, has not changed. You have to grow, you have to produce revenue, but you can't spend money willy-nilly. So talk to us a little bit about how the conversation has changed between your organization, with your CEO, with your finance leaders, and also your other engineering leaders. How are you seeing this play out?
Yeah, I can take a stab here. So as Jess mentioned, we are both a hardware and software company. And even though, as you can imagine, quantum computers are pretty expensive to build, from a materials perspective, labor continues to be and will always be, I believe, our most expensive cost that we need to think about. And we try to pride ourselves as being one of the leaders in the industry. And so we are always looking to hire the best and brightest talent, which often comes with a high cost. And so how do we continue to grow to meet both our internal roadmap projections and also our customer demand, while also thinking about the market that we're in? And so like you mentioned, Tushar, we went public at like one of the peaks of the market. And so how do we make sure that the cash runway that we have kind of lasts us through our projections and our timelines and all that kind of stuff? And so the hardest way to do that is to do that on spreadsheets, which are pretty all over the place and not exactly the most dynamic. And so as a team, we continue to see a hiring need across the different departments and divisions that we have, but we didn't have a good way of tracking that, both from like a people perspective, a recruiting perspective, and then also selfishly for us as a finance team, the finance perspective. And so that's kind of where Team Ohana kind of fits into this. Is like, how do we grow responsibly, but how do we also grow? And if we need to accelerate, we can accelerate. And if we need to like slow down a bit, we know where to slow down. And so that's kind of where Team Ohana fits into the picture.
Great. So, I mean,
yeah, having that real-time view, and not just when we make our budget, for 2020, beginning of 2023, or as we start our 2024 budget cycle, but having a growing agile budget. So when we make changes or change our view, or maybe we realize, oh, we need somebody here instead of there, it's real-time reflected for recruiting, HR, and finance, as well as the hiring managers.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this need for agile decision making and moving fast, and so let's talk a little bit about your current stack. So it is, why don't you tell us a little bit about your current, not just the people stack, the finance stack, and how all the things work together?
I can start here. And so we have a dedicated HRIS system that the people team kind of runs. We also have a recruiting software tool that the talent acquisition team kind of owns. And as a finance team, we also have an FP&A tool and software that we own. And the nice thing is Team Ohana is kind of the bridge between all three. And so we use the different sources of truth for what's needed. So like when we're thinking about like where a candidate is in the offer stage or in the recruiting stage, that's all coming from our recruiting platform and feeding directly into Team Ohana. And as Jess was mentioning, everything is live and dynamic. And so when a candidate accepts an offer, we can see that. When the official start date is signed, we can move that into Team Ohana like automatic. We don't have to move anything. It moves itself to Team Ohana. And so the budget adjusts from there. When employees start and their life cycle through IonQ, from starting their first day through promotions and moving teams and reorgs and all that kind of stuff, that's all managed by our HRIS system, but automatically gets transferred over to Team Ohana. And the beautiful thing is, while these different systems are the source of truth, Team Ohana also allows you to add like extra layers on top of that to be dynamic. And so you can take headcount that hasn't been in seat yet and move it into an org chart. So when you look at your org chart, if you want to, you can see, okay, like this is where I am in seat today. But like, let me layer on top of that my hiring plan to understand like how my hiring team is going to grow. And I think Jess can agree to this, is our teams love the UI and the UX that Team Ohana allows them to do, and people are excited to actually log into the system. I can't say that all of our other systems are very user-friendly and people enjoy logging into every day, but I'm pretty confident that a lot of our executive team and hiring managers log into Team Ohana every day just to understand where their recruits are at and where their own headcount is at. So
yeah, I think we kind of jumped through the next hoop and we started talking about what is the current state of affairs, which, appreciate you mentioning Team Ohana on how there are benefits to using such a platform. But let's do a look back. Let's try and understand. Charlie, can you go to the next slide, please? Let's understand, like, I'm just gonna repeat the truth. 70% of your operating expenses in a company is headcount. One of the key differentiators in your company is that it's also the R&D org is within all people, R&D org is the largest expense bucket. So, and which is very talent intensive as well. But let's do a look back on your process, because I think the audience will appreciate some of the pains or the top 3 pains. Let's of using a spreadsheet system, because you do have an FP&A software, which is great for budgeting. You do have an HRIS, which is good for understanding the existing button seat and the cost of those employees. You also have a very you have an applicant tracking system that it gives you a good information about who are the next few hires in the next 3-6 months that are going to make it into the company. But again, let's do a quick understanding of what was your world before you started using a platform for headcount planning and management. And the hint. Tell me about why you love spreadsheets.
So our original was, we were using just like a Google spreadsheet that was shared with accounting, HR, hiring managers, us. And it was always wrong. I would say every time that the more we would look into it and dig into it, the more we would find mistakes and errors, maybe tagged to the wrong division or the wrong department, confusion, because obviously we can't share this hiring spreadsheet with hiring managers because they would see, all the information for the entire company, which isn't necessarily what you want all your hiring managers to see. You want to have that ability to dive in and, make sure they only focus on the folks they need to hire for, not necessarily everyone in the company. And I mean, I know Omar can talk to this too, but yeah, just lots and lots of errors. And every time we would do the budget cycle or forecast, it was always this huge thing of, okay, now we need to go back to our spreadsheet, reconcile, make sure, is this the right information before we pour it into the budget, and start actually attaching numbers to all these different heads. So it's just a long manual process.
Let me double click on that. So how often what was the mandate that we should reconcile headcount? How often were you reconciling headcount to the plan? Was it once a month, once a quarter?
I would say we would do it minimum one, but mostly it was just also ad hoc in between we would look and we'd be like, oh, this isn't right. We have this headcount twice, or, oh, we just find errors as we were going through recruiting cycles. And it would just become a whole messy thing that turned into, way more time on all sides, because you have to get to the bottom of what is the error and where is it coming from and what is the right answer here.
Makes sense. There are a couple of things that come when we talk to either finance leaders or HR leaders. The decision on who owns headcount sometimes is murky, right? I always say finance owns headcount budgeting, but actual headcount is an HR responsibility, right? But how does this play out? Like, talk to us a little bit about, and I think our listeners would like to hear, how are you making it all work? Not probably all remote. What was the cadence to talk to talent? What was the cadence to talk to HR in order to come up with that spreadsheet so that you can run a monthly forecast?
Yeah, I think you
accurate or not, I don't know, but you're running a monthly forecast.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you brought up is important, is that each team has their own focus area, and then finance, I like to see it as we sit in the middle and kind of support all teams. And so in some cases, we would build out the recruiting or hiring tracker for the talent acquisition team, but they would own that. But then, like Jess was mentioning, like throughout the month or throughout the quarter, someone would find an issue and then they would come to finance and expect it to be fixed. It wasn't necessarily because like we were the connecting dots between the recruiting team, the people team, and then also the hiring teams. And so we were like the ones responsible and had to do that lift. And so to your point, like who owns what, I think it gets very murky. And I don't want to like go too far ahead, but like that was one of the reasons why we really love Team Ohana, which is like everyone can continue owning what they own and no one has to change their ownership, or you're not necessarily adding extra workload on any team. And so this was not a big sell for us as a finance team to convince anyone to get into Team Ohana. I think everyone was excited about one automated like automated information flow from one system to another with a very clear source of truth for where each thing is coming from. And so no one's confused on who owns what. And then the second thing that I think Jess was touching on was also the transparency aspect. Like the biggest thing is like as a division lead, you want to see all your departments and who's hiring what. You can easily do that. If you want to give access to other people on the executive team to also see your hiring plans, you can do that because we found that as we're growing, there's inner teams need to make trades or make decisions on like, okay, you're hiring a couple TPMs, maybe I don't need to hire a TPM, or instead of you hiring two, can you donate one? I'll give you a scientist or a physicist or something. And so to Jess's point, like that transparency is lost from the hiring managers to the department leads to the division leads, and then also the recruiting team. And so having a software or a tool that kind of allowed us to do all that was really important with what Jess was talking about, the importance of like controls on who gets to see what and when they get to see things. Because obviously maybe you don't want all the recruiting team to see the whole hiring plan. You only want them to see certain parts of the hiring plan because you don't want to give someone too much access. Or maybe you do want to give everyone access, but you don't want to give your whole department access to the whole division. So like each team can make that decision. Each team can make a decision on compensation. Each team can make a decision on any part of the system. And we didn't have any of that. And so it was like, no one want to take responsibility of anything, but now that it's very cut and clear on who owns what part of the process, and you have a system that kind of talks to all the other systems, and us as an FP&A team, we just go in to like kind of be the shepherds on who owns what. I think that was kind of where we were and like what made Team Ohana a very easy sell, at least internally, and why we continuously use and see people using the system.
Yeah, Charlie, you skipped too many slides. Go back.
I think yeah. So one question came up actually, and that was around just a quick more of a about IonQ, and it was how many employees are at IonQ, and how many countries are you operating in?
So unfortunately, because we're a public company, we can't disclose the exact amount of employees, but I can give you a ballpark. We are less than 500. And we are predominantly in the US, but we are expanding globally. We just announced, well, not just, but we broke ground in Seattle, for example, in the US, and then also Toronto recently signed a larger deal in Switzerland, so expanding international as well. But our biggest footprint is in the US.
Makes sense. I want to, and what has been the growth of the last 12 or 18 months in terms of headcount?
At least double. We've doubled our headcount, I would say. Yeah.
Double the headcount.
Easily. Yeah.
Good. So let's, I think I want to bring in this, I ask a question around collaboration with a non-people or a non-finance leader at the organization. And, because R&D is your largest expense bucket within the organization, you are the original AI, the quantum computing, right? The original hype cycle. So how, and also let's not talk about the happy path, right? I want us to also talk about like, what were the challenges or what were some of the ways you were collaborating with the R&D leader at your organization? Because not everybody has either capacity or even budget in this environment to implement a new system, right? And I don't want this to be just what are the things that Team Ohana can do, but let's give people some ideas on how were you coping and what were your ways that you were collaborating with, especially the R&D leader, while still working in spreadsheets?
Yeah, so we had a couple spreadsheets that Jess and I and the rest of our team on the finance side would own. The first one, which was just like a quote unquote org chart spreadsheet, which was basically taking the current heads that are butts in seat and then layering on top of that like future hires that have been approved, and then also laying on top of that like future hires that haven't been approved but are proposed. And then different teams would own their each spreadsheet. So you can imagine within the company there was tens of these spreadsheets. Some division heads wanted to roll those up, and so each division would have a main source of truth. But again, the teams would own something, and then they would have to kind of like at some point roll it into the larger one. And then some teams that Jess and I both collaborated on were like they wanted to roll it up across multiple divisions. And so like when you're talking like on the R&D side, we have three main groups there. and they kind of wanted to see each other's headcount just because, like I mentioned, they work very closely together and wanted to understand like the hiring needs. And also as things change, as Jess was mentioning earlier, you kind of need to change your priorities on who you're hiring and when you're hiring them. And so we had a master spreadsheet there. And so across the table, there was, as you can kind of tell, that there was a lot of like org chart / like hiring spreadsheets that were living that we were kind of expected to keep up to date. So that was like one type of spreadsheets that were like alive and breathing. And then another group of spreadsheets that were living was like the actual recruiting hiring tracker that like FP&A would set up at the beginning of the year. Once the budget was approved, we would fill that out with the role, the team, the division, the department, like the expected compensation, all that information, the expected start date. And then the recruiting team would kind of take it from there and like own it in a sense of like, okay, like this person is open in our ARIS system, not open and all that kind of stuff. And then the recruiting team was expected to go into the master org chart sheets and like update as like start dates were finalized or levels were finalized or like teams were finalized. And so that was like one sense of like, okay, like where's the source of truth? And sometimes both sheets gave different information. Sometimes they lined up, but like we're actually both wrong. So like that was always a question mark. And then the last spreadsheet that we kind of owned and helped own was like the new hire spreadsheet. It was essentially like, okay, like these people are starting soon. These are the information that this is the information we kind of need on who they will report to and when they'll start and like what kind of computer do they want and like where are they actually going to be located if they're remote and all that information. But like that was also not very automated in the sense that like you have to be notified, like the HR team had to be notified that this person will be starting soon. Then they had to go and get inputted into the sheet. And like, let's just say someone came back to the recruiting team, since that would be their main point of contact, and say, oh, actually, can I push my start date a week? The recruiting team would have to remember to go back to the HR team and tell them, oh, actually, don't send them their laptop a week early, send it a week late. And so there was no like double checks on like the data flow or any of that kind of stuff. But those were like the main spreadsheets that we owned on top of the budget that finance would own and have to go in and make changes. And so like as we would reconcile and like go through our quarterly process or monthly process, new headcounts or like new start dates or all that kind of stuff, we would have to go into our main budget and change those forecasts. If we want to do like projections and all that kind of stuff, that was also another sheet. So like there's a lot of sheets.
Yeah, I think Charlie, let's go to the next slide, because I think now may be a good time to talk through the impact of this. And you know, we are lucky enough to have enough customers to run some analysis. But I think this is the most underappreciated part of the finance function, and even to a certain extent HR and talent function, because I think the general assumption is that they are used to doing spreadsheet wrangling. That is the job, right? Oh yes, of course, everything has been manual for decades, right? It's like if I hire a salesperson tomorrow, I have to buy 3 systems before they start doing one thing. But I don't think that works on the finance side or even on the talent and people side. It's like, yeah, this is what is the mandate and go and deliver. So and you may not be able to give us numbers, which is okay, but talk to me a little bit about this framework that we have put on the screen. Does this make sense that there are people who touch headcount, there are hiring managers, and then there's basically things that slip through the cracks, like things that are happening outside of budget, but by the time you're able to reconcile, it's too late. Have you thought about what was the actual cost of not doing headcount planning right, or at least continuing to do it in a manual way that you just explained within all these different spreadsheets?
Yeah, and I think this is definitely something that we've thought about, but we didn't realize how high the cost savings were just on our time alone. Because like what you were saying to Shar about, oh, we're just used to living in spreadsheets and everything being manual and being hard is very true. And we didn't realize how much time we were spending just reconciling spreadsheets until we didn't necessarily have to do that anymore. And especially when you're talking about working directly with executives, high-level managers, whatnot, their time is valuable. We want these folks focusing on how do we build the next quantum computer and how do we get to our next AQ goal, not necessarily oh, how many people do I have for this year again? And what were the salary ranges and what were the levels? And back and forth email chain of, oh, we had this approved, but actually 6 months later, it looks like it's this and all this confusion. And when you add up all those hours and miscommunications that are just avoided with Team Ohana, I know Omar and I, when we looked at this, we were like, oh, actually, this is right on. Especially when you're factoring in just our time too. Mhm.
Right. Omar, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, it just hit the nail on the head. I think like every team, if you're in the startup slash growth stage, like we are, and like in this environment, you're thinking about how can I run my teams lean? And
Mhm.
I think most executives already spend enough time because they need to on hiring. You don't want them to focus on this other hiring stuff that's very much like low like ROI work, which is like, okay, can I remember like why I made the decision 6 months ago? I don't have any source of truth. I can't audit this back. Like, why do I need to manually like update things across systems? Like, how do I like tag recruiters to something without having to start like 10 different email chains or a Slack chain? Like everything can just be in one spot. Like can I designate like, okay, I'm going to be out of town for a few weeks, or I want to be the hiring manager, but I want to be the reporting manager, but I want to be the hiring manager. How can I distinguish between the two and let like everyone know? Like, how can I like communicate with finance? There's like so many things that goes on in the background that you want the executives and the senior managers out of the process and maybe just aware of what's going on and allow everything else to kind of run seamlessly in the background. And if you start tying up like finance, like HR, like the compensation team, the executive team, and the hiring team, like everyone's compensation that's being spent on this and the time wasted, I think you'll get a really big number, and you realize, like Jess was saying, like I think your average finance team is used to working in spreadsheets and Excel. They don't see it as a reason to get out of Excel, but when you realize that you don't actually need to be doing any of this work, it's not like you're doing the work in Team Ohana. Like the work doesn't need to be done, period. I think that's the that's the most important part for us. It's like it's not like you're redoing the work somewhere else. It's like no, the work is no longer needed.
Right. I think that's the meta point, right? It's like it's not about can you do this work, but did you even need to do this work? Is this the most what we say is the high value work that you expect to be doing and producing for your organization? Great. I think Charlie, let's go to the next slide. And yeah, audience, if does this framework resonate with you? I think that's what Charlie has posted a question. I mean, you can also disagree with Jessica and Omar. They are very good people, and you can say, well, spreadsheets work great for me, and that's okay. But let's talk about this new. It is not a new buzzword, but it is now front and center that finance needs to be a strategic partner to the business, right? It's not about just counting dollars or like it is about programming the company to run in a way that that's infinite growth in a way, right? And I think there's a talk about, I listen to at least one talk a week around strategic finance and becoming strategic partners. Everybody comes down to and say there is some magic tool that you must buy. So but I don't believe that. I will also tell people that I don't, as the founder of Team Ohana, I love my product, but again, there is no magic. It's about removing unnecessary processes to make you efficient. But what do you think now that you are able to do for your organization that you were not able to do 1 year back? And I know we didn't discuss this question during the prep because I really wanted your unfiltered answers. Like, let's riff on this for the next 5 minutes. It's like, and it can be anything. You can say, you know what, I go home early on Fridays. That's great. Oh my, maybe walking, taking a walk during the day.
Yeah.
So tell me what has changed.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like sometimes we can remove ourselves out of the process and give the ownership back to the hiring managers or reporting managers or even the hiring, like the talent acquisition team. Like we don't need to be the ones figuring out the problem, the solution or the answer because all the data doesn't make any sense, right? So like now anyone can log into Team Ohana, anyone can go see their hiring team, like their team, anyone can see where they are in the process. Anyone can figure out the finances without having to ask the finance team on these like lower level questions that would take a very long time to run in the background, but like weren't necessarily complicated things to think about. And so like that ownership and that responsibility is, I think, important, especially as you're going into like we're in this market environment where like you need to think about growth, but you need to think about responsible growth. And so like understanding how like each new headcount impacts your budget, or each new start date, whether you're pulling it or pushing it, changes your budget and your run rate and all that kind of stuff, I think it's important to empower the teams to do. And like as you go to this, like what does strategic finance mean to you? Like the funny thing is Jess and I are neither traditional finance people. So like we came into this role more with a business partner hat than the finance hat. And we had to learn the finance piece while like leveraging our experience working with executives and management teams in the past. And so we try to automate and like solve the finance problems as easy and simple as possible, understanding that we aren't finance people and the people we're working with aren't finance people. And so how do we give them the tools to kind of figure out what they need to do to continue executing? But that's the first thing that came to my mind, and I'll leave it to Jess to kind of fill in the rest.
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest things for me is, I mean, we're part of an organization that is going to go through constant change, right? We're a quantum computing company. It's a brand new industry, a brand new product. Everything about it is brand new. And I think what's really helped us is when we do these reorgs for a headcount, it's not necessarily as stressful. Like we understand, oh, okay, we can visualize, oh, how is our new planning going to work? What are these new teams and initiatives going to look like within Team Ohana? And that for me has just made it a lot less anxiety inducing when we do our reorgs, every 6 months, it feels like. But at least we have a tool where we can easily implement it. And it's just a matter of, okay, let's just change the department and division in this one area. It's not like we have to go to 10 different spreadsheets and widely communicate. It's all in one place.
Yeah, it reminds me the story you were telling that, it's not just even a straight up swap. Like sometimes you can swap two engineers with two facilities managers, right?
Yeah.
So it's awesome. All right, I think I want to start summarizing, and let's do it, then open it up to people. I think, can you let's do this rapid fire. Like, what is the one benefit that comes to mind for the company, not for you as an individual? Like, how has visibility changed the company? And we'll, Omar, you get the next one. But Jessica, very quickly, when you think about visibility, what is the biggest hard-hitting impact for the company having this visibility into headcount?
Oh, I think for us, what's great is I'll be in meetings with, for example, our VP of finance or even our CFO, and they'll be like, oh, what's the run rate for the company right now? And I'm like, oh, here's the dashboard and here's a visualization and here you go. Like, look at this. This is our headcount growth. As you can see, we could do a lot better about planning our start dates. Like maybe, we should talk to our teams about this and smoothing up start dates and whatnot. And these will just be like rapid fire questions that normally I'd have to be like, let me get back to you in an hour or whatnot. But in the meantime, I just pull it up. Even for budget versus actuals, we have Team Ohana up, and we're going through not just with our executive team, but with all the folks in the company that are part of our budget versus actuals. So they can see, oh, this is where our teams are hiring. This is how they're doing. This is the issues that they're facing for hiring. And it's just like an open dialogue that they all have access to.
Great. Omar, about collaboration, and let's talk about cross-functional collaboration between other departments.
You want to talk about cross-functional, or you don't?
I want to.
Yeah.
What's the number one impact of having good cross-functional collaboration around headcount? Business.
Yeah, I think it just allows the teams to understand what they're each doing and not doing hiring or project planning in silos. And so when you think about like building a quantum computer, obviously there's many different divisions all involved here. Some parts focus on the design, some focus on the production, some focus on the R&D efforts. So like it's all across the board. And so, but they all need to talk to each other in different parts. And so Team Ohana allows you to do that. It allows you to see where each team is hiring. It allows you to kind of like make trades, like, oh, like like I kind of was mentioning before, like, oh, I think I need this person. Can I actually take that requisition from you and I'll give you someone else instead? Or like you give me someone in C and I'll give you a requisition. And so you can do all that kind of stuff like in a collaborative fashion and see the audit trail in Team Ohana. So that's what kind of comes to mind.
I think with your collaboration answer, I think you also touched upon efficiency, and we spoke about agility. So I'll come down to this thing about we believe good processes should result in better decision making. Does an example come to mind to support this assertion?
One that comes to mind that's recent is, we're going to be starting our 2024 budget cycle soon. And one of the biggest questions is, what should our budget envelope be? And when you're a company like us, where headcount is one of our major costs, and, we need an estimate of, okay, what's the run rate? We just, approved some new hires with our reforecast plan. What does this look like for impact for 2024? We were able to just go in and, like in the budgeting tab for Team Ohana, and we just saw, okay, this is our run rate and this is how it's going to impact our whole budget envelope. And it's an easy case of, okay, this is why our budget envelope needs to rise from 2023 to 2024, just because of run rate alone.
Okay, that's a good one. Finally, cost savings, right? It is some parts funny that you want finance to be strategic, but then you also want finance to count pennies. But that is such is life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So talk to a little bit about, is there a quantifiable way to talk about cost savings of having a better process and using a platform dedicated for headcount?
I think so I would say like there's two cost savings that come to mind, and we talk about both. The first one is that like it saves everyone cost and everyone's time on like doing all this low quality work. And so it kind of eliminates all that and saves the company overall money. But I think the second one, which also goes into visibility a bit, it just like makes everyone understand what the impact of each hire has on the team and then on the overall budget. And so when you're asking for a specific level, you're asking for a specific person to be promoted, or you're asking for a specific number of hires. Like before, it was very hard to translate what that means, both on an annual run rate and also on this year's budget, when you take everything else into consideration. But when you go now and you want to say, okay, I asked for this person to be hired in November of 2023, and I actually now want them to be in March, you need to understand what that actually means to your overall budget, right? And so this like shows that, and I think once you give ownership to teams, they also want to be owners, and so when they have the owner's mentality, everyone's looking to be like cost effective, and so that's an area that I think we see a lot of cost savings on. People like make the trade-off, like, okay, like I can delay this hire in order to do XYZ instead of asking for them too early or whatnot. And so instead of us having to dictate the decision to be cost savings, I think the teams have taken the ownership on being like thinking about cost savings themselves.
I think, and we've talked about this, and a CFO I was talking to last week also said, is that it's not about like, don't tell me that do you have visibility and control. I'm the CFO. If I'm doing my job right, I have visibility and control. Everybody in finance should have visibility. It is more about the people who I have giving this budget to spend the money to actually make better decisions, right? And I think, I think that is one thing that we are also very excited about our platform, around allowing those department leaders to run scenarios on their own, and then bringing in finance for more insight and approval, rather than just coming to finance and say, hey, can you please do this for me, and how do I get this done?
Exactly.
Awesome. So, all right, we'll open this up to questions, but I just wanted to say is that if someone's wondering what is Team Ohana, Team Ohana connects with all your finance, HR, and talent systems to build a single source of headcount truth, and then enables you workflows on top so that you can actually do three most important things. You can plan, whether it is top-down planning or bottoms-up planning, you can manage. And then the third thing is you can actually grow the headcount by staying in budget and also hiring the right talent at the right time. So I think that's the overall benefit of the platform. But we'll open it up to questions now, if there are any. Charlie, you have a question?
I do. So, we have a couple of questions. So one question here is around where does Planful end and, headcount planning platform like Team Ohana begin? Like, at what point is there like the break? I think is what this question is asking,
Jess, that's you.
or either of you.
Okay. So I would say Planful is really just for, it's not very dynamic. It's like at this point in time, what is the list of this people? Who are the people in your org? What are your open recs? It's not very like conducive to being dynamic. So if you make a lot of changes, like Planful just doesn't really keep up. Also, like for Planful, we just use it for our really detailed costs. So for example, like what is our 401k allocation or stock-based comp versus cash for bonuses, those sorts of costs, or even like FICA and other things. Whereas Ohana is more of an overall overhead rate. So it gets you that estimate, whereas Planful's a little bit more precise. But yeah, I would say the main thing is that Planful is an FP&A tool. It's not meant for headcount planning. For example, if you want to add, like our HR department doesn't have access to it. It's just our FP&A team. So it doesn't really operate as a single source of truth beyond just what's in the budget at this moment in time. Whereas Ohana is more of a dynamic headcount planning tool. So it's a lot more collaborative. And it's updated real time. It's not quite stale like your budget is. Mm-hmm.
And along those lines, like what is the typical reforecast cycle that you guys are going through?
Okay, so we typically do our reforecast. We got through one in June, and we do it about every 6 months. Although I'm probably in the future we'll probably end up doing it quarterly at some point, but at least right now it's every 6 months. And essentially what we do is we pull, okay, here are all our headcount, here's our open recs. How do we want to reallocate our open recs to maybe redirect to different initiatives? I know for engineering, that is a huge part of our headcount, and depending on different projects, we want to reallocate headcount. Maybe we didn't need as many in one area as we did in another. So a lot of it, I mean, because so many of our costs are headcount, and that's what our department managers are most focused on, right? When they come into the budget cycle, the first questions they ask is, how much headcount can I have? And explain why they need to double or triple their department, even though we don't have infinite cash. We have to, as finance, set boundaries, or because that's our role. Yes, that's what I would say. Like our reforecast process is definitely like very headcount focused, and we use Ohana to do a lot of our different planning, as well as grant, for example, new project initiatives, which is what we do in our reforecast. Our CEO and CFO will go, what are the new strategic directions that we want to fund? And that's what we did for the reforecast. We funded them. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we're gonna end it now. Thank you, Jess and Omar, for sharing all these amazing insights. We have, or actually I should say Charlie has, as a good marketing leader in the company, compiled a lot of good information into our headcount management playbook that is available for download on our website. And we'll also send this to everybody who signed up for this webinar. And yeah, if there are any questions that come up, please let us know. More than happy to chat and share more about what we are doing, and also what we are learning from a lot of smart people who are finding better ways on optimizing their time and efficiency in the company. So yeah, this was great. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Omar.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.